This episode, creating dry space under a deck. Larry recently installed a dry space under the deck. John wanted to know more. Alas, a show was born. Welcome to the Handyman Pros Radio Show. Home improvement and maintenance tips from the pros. Thanks for listening to the Handyman Pros Radio Show, where our goal is to help save you time, money, and aggravation on your home maintenance and repair. This edition is entitled Creating Dry Space Under a Deck. To help me explain, I'm here with my ever-cheerful co-host and old buddy, Johnny. Johnny!
Yep, I'm here, man.
What's been happening this week?
I'm here. Well, let's see. What's going on this week? I had to fix some damage on the on my deck, actually. For some reason, when the wood starts to get rotten, squirrels start to like it.
Sounds like the woodpeckers on the back of my house. Yeah, but keep
and
going.
They were eating the, not that I need to replace these boards, but boy, they find every little soft piece of wood and just, I don't know, grinding their teeth down, I guess, and whatever they're doing. But man, one of them was really going to town on an old piece of wood out there.
You don't let Cujo go take care of those squirrels?
When he's out there, he takes care of those squirrels. But
so, folks, John got a new dog, and I affectionately call it Cujo. Either that, I can't really announce what his new name is because John is constantly using a four-letter word to tell him to get down and be quiet, because that's what his new name is going to be. He just doesn't know it yet.
That's it. But yep, I wish he was out there all the time, but he's not. So every morning, unsuspectingly, I see some squirrel running across the deck, and I'm like, "Yep, that's got to be him." But
Johnny,
it could be worse, though. It could be worse because I've had him chew holes through through some crown molding I've got on the outside, and that was a real pain in the rump because they chewed through that to get in the house. And
yeah, you know how those things get taken care of around the town.
Yeah.
They get lead poisoning,
Yep.
usually of the 22 caliber variety. But
Yep.
What can I say? So anyway.
Anyways, Larry, we were talking about the dry, keeping the underneath of your deck dry. And a lot of people have raised decks.
Yep.
And that's quite the thing, is to have, some kind of material to seal that off so you can live underneath it even while it's raining, right?
Yep. So
you did that, and I was curious.
I did that for a customer. Yeah, I did that for a customer. And there's a whole series of technologies that do this kind of work.
Mm-hmm.
I just kind of did it the old-fashioned way. I call it the old-fashioned way. I've seen this done many, many a time, and that is they take roofing material of the hard variety, so basically metal, or I happen to use fiberglass roofing, so they make fiberglass roof panels, and you turn them upside down, basically, and you screw them up into the rafters. Now, it's not that simple, so I'll get into the weeds on it a little bit. But basically, you take like a rigid roofing system, so metal or plastic or whatever, and you kind of flip it upside down and you attach it to the underside of the deck. And lo and behold, what you end up with are channels that the water runs down to keep it dry below the deck and take the water where you want it to go. It's not really a difficult project. It's a pretty good amount of work. I guess it depends on how complex you want to be. And like anything, John, you did a little research on this. Are there complex systems out there?
Yeah, there's a lot of, this is a whole business unto itself. And
Yep.
There's all kinds of products and services and companies that do this thing. So what was interesting was that you went about it, that, just went down to the big box store and got some of the materials and things and did it yourself. So some of the things I saw were pretty expensive, but, for everybody out there that just wants to do this and just get it done. I mean, you can get as fancy and, sky high, as much as you want to spend.
Just like anything.
Yeah, just
right?
like anything. So,
Yep.
Right? You went to some big box stores to get everything you needed.
All my stuff came out of big box stores. Yep, it sure did. And so let me just kind of lay out the scope of this project. So this was a 42 by 12 area underneath the deck.
Mm-hmm.
And which is a pretty good, that's
Mm-hmm.
a pretty good size. I can't, what is 42 times 12 is what, 580 square feet or something like that. My
Mm-hmm.
math is right. Anyway, be that as it may, it's a pretty big underdeck cover. In under this particular deck, there was no electrical. There were no ceiling fans, nothing like that. They did happen to have a bench swing that was attached into one of the joists. So I just want to lay that out. So this was basically a 12 feet wide, 42 feet long, clear span. The joists were running on the 12-foot axis, so it was from the wall out was 12 feet. So if that gives you kind of an idea of how it was, the deck was long and thin, not
Mm-hmm.
really thin, but
Yeah.
it to give everybody perspective.
Well,
So when they asked me about the job, I looked at it and I said, yeah, this is within my scope because it was not, too super big, where we would need two people or something
yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
So when I looked at this and when I got the measurements, one of my goals was I don't like to piece together pieces, especially on this, because folks, you do have to put a pitch in there, and I'll explain how to do that in a bit. But the pitch that you put in is extremely shallow, and so you really want solid pieces of roofing if you can get them. Now, metal roofing, of course, if you want to buy metal roofing, you can get that in really whatever length you want. Like literally, they'll make it 40 feet long if you want. I don't know how you get it to the job site, but or lift it up. It's going to take 14 people to lift that piece
Right.
up to do that. But 12 feet was within the big box spec. I have a couple of metal roof places that I can get metal roof pieces made for here north of Atlanta. And I looked at using those, and Johnny, guess what?
Hmm.
Metal roofing has gone way up in price.
Yep.
Like,
Yep.
wow.
Yeah.
So yeah, so being that the eye is on
Yeah.
being,
It's almost as bad as steak.
it's almost as bad as filling your tank up with
Yeah.
gasoline
Right.
right now. You
Right.
know,
I put a
so
new roof on my house every time
woo,
I fill up.
yeah, pretty much. But anyway, but with that, so I was kind of keeping my eye on the dollars too, and with the understanding that there's a couple of factors that you need to think about when you're up underneath the deck. One of the factors is there's no sunshine, right? So
Mm-hmm.
your choice of materials kind of opens up because of that. Like personally, I would not use fiberglass roof panels on in the sun. And why would that be, John? Because
Yeah. Well, it can
the UV
warp and
rays, yeah,
yeah,
and it
it's
gets
brittle and
brittle and it hardens up and it
yeah.
breaks quick. But underneath the deck where it's not exposed to that constant UV, it's a little bit of a different issue.
Right.
So I was down at the big box store, or actually I looked them up online, but they had 12-foot sections in my local store of this. I can't remember what it's called, but it just looks like corrugated
It's
metal.
corrugated. Yeah.
Yep, but
Mm-hmm.
it happens to be plastic, fiberglass, whatever you want to call it, and that's what I decided to use. And I decided to use it for a lot of reasons, but one of the reasons was it wasn't going to get nasty in the sun because it was underneath the deck, and it's not going to carry an absolute huge amount of water because it's underneath the deck.
Yeah.
And they had them in one piece, so they had 12-foot wide pieces. Actually, my deck I ended up having to cut each piece a little bit lower, and I've got a great tip that I'm going to give on how to cut that plastic. And I actually tried it with some PVC and stuff too. So I'll do that in a bit. But that's what we chose for materials. When you build these underdeck things, you do have to have a place. Well, you don't have to have a place for the water to go. You could just run the water out off the end of the deck if you choose. But this particular customer wanted it in a gutter system and wanted it run off
That's the way I've usually seen
end of
them.
the deck, which is, yeah, that's usually how you see them. And I think that's probably a preferable
Right.
way to do it. So again, because we were up underneath, I chose vinyl gutters because they're not exposed to the sunlight much, and you don't need a huge capacity of water because you don't have a huge capacity of water.
Right.
So we chose vinyl gutters and downspouts to do this. So that's the materials. That's basically what we installed. We did use we used screws with rubber grommets on them.
Mm-hmm.
So the rubber grommets actually seal where the screw goes up through, just like you would in traditional metal roofing.
Mm-hmm.
You use a rubber sealing grommet, or you could caulk each screw. But I will say this: there's a lot of screws.
Yeah.
It's
right.
a lot.
Of course.
It's
yeah.
a lot. It's a lot of screws. So do yourself a favor and just use the rubber grommet screws that you can get. All right, that's materials. Do you have any questions,
So
John?
yeah, well, so when you're putting that up, then okay, so that's the materials, right?
Hmm.
Um, but when you start to put that up, you have to. It's got to be just like a roof. It's got to have some kind of pitch. So I've
Does
got
have to
a,
have pitch.
right. So I do have a couple of questions. So you can pitch that stuff down, and how did you pitch that down? Just with
Ah,
go ahead.
the magic question. So again, the joists were running the
Yeah,
12-foot length. So I actually put strips across the deck.
yeah,
And I started out at the outside edge of the deck at about where I knew I had enough space. You have to allot for space for your gutters.
yeah,
So you have to have, you need 4 to 6 inches for your gutters because you're going to have a lip over the gutter and the water pours into the gutter. And you need to think about that before you do the job. And you need to figure out how are you actually going to attach the gutter to the edge of the deck. I actually built little frames that came down and the gutter attached to those. So I basically took pieces of 2x4 and extended them down from the edge from the edge of the deck down to where I could put a gutter mount on, and then I trimmed them out with PVC when I got done. So, and then I painted the inside of them so that it wasn't quite as obvious. I could have trimmed it out with PVC, but it was just a money saving thing to just paint them. The under the deck was white anyway, so I painted them white. But you need to allot for that. And then you just basically, I started with an 1.5 inch strip. I used a 1x1, a 1.5 by 1.5. I just took a 1.5 by 1.5, and I ran it the full length and you across the joist. And then I took and figured out what the angle was back in. And basically it worked out to be 3/8 of an inch every 4 feet. No, every 3 feet. So I put, and the manufacturer suggests you do it every 2 feet, but because that's for roofing. If you're doing purlins and you're doing roofing and this is going to be the outside, they say every 2 feet. I did the calculations and actually called the manufacturer and said, I'm doing an underdeck system. I said, is 3 feet going to work? And they said, yes, you'll be fine. As long as you attach the edge up to the joists, you'll be fine. I said, perfect. That's not going to be an issue.
Yeah, because one of the things that occurs to me is that if you don't have enough pitch, there's obviously an issue right there from
Correct.
water runoff. But if you don't have it'd be nice to and correct me if I'm wrong, it'd be nice to have a pitch that would carry the water away faster underneath there, maybe to clean out stuff when it rains. You know what I mean? Does that make
Yeah,
sense? To
it
carry stuff
does.
away other than just trickle out of there, because that was one of the things that we've talked about before. We've been on some jobs and underneath the deck is just a disaster, and now that you put that under there, all the stuff that falls through the deck gets collected under there.
Collects and catches. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that, so I don't have a hard answer for you. I do know that on this deck, we only had about 8 feet of total height at the outside edge of the deck.
Mm-hmm.
So I really
I see
couldn't
what you're saying.
come.
Yeah.
I had to be careful how far
Yeah.
down I came, or you
Yeah.
wouldn't be able to walk under
Yeah.
it.
Right.
And this
Of
deck
course.
was made to walk in and out of
Mm-hmm.
underneath. So I was being aware of that, and that was one of the other tips in your planning is just understand if people are exiting and entering under that, you can't put like unlimited pitch in there. I mean that doesn't work. So you have to have enough clearance. And I was leaving. I left 7 feet 6 inches of clearance up under there because remember the gutter hangs down below the
Mm-hmm.
pitch of the roof, and so we had an inch and a half plus the corrugations in the gutter, which added about another inch. And then we had 4 inches of gutter underneath that. So that left me just about, I think it was actually 7 feet 5 inches below the gutter to the top of the deck. And I'm 6'4".
Yeah,
So
that's about minimum right there.
yeah, it was right. It's right about
Yeah.
at the right height.
Yeah.
And so that
Okay.
and folks, that's a consideration too. You want to make sure you're thinking about it that way before you undertake this project. Because last thing you want to do is put it up and go, oh, oops,
Yeah. Right.
I'm
Exactly.
doing the limbo under the gutter.
Right.
Woo! Yeah,
Yeah.
not so good, not so good. So yeah. So anyway, to answer your question, I don't really have an answer for your question. I guess the one thing is that when it's not raining, take the blower and just blow out under your deck. You know.
Yeah.
And you'll blow that stuff down. Most of the stuff that, and if you think about it, most of the stuff that gets through the cracks in your decks, when I took the screening up on my deck in the back, which I think we mentioned in a long ago
Yeah.
show,
Yeah.
but I removed a deck from the back of my house, folks, and what we found is somebody had put insect screening up underneath the deck between the joists and the boards, and it was loaded with pine straw. So, and another thing is, folks, here in the South, we use what's called pine straw. It's the pine needles that are put out on the ground. I didn't know that, John, until I moved here, by the way. So anyway, there's this stuff called pine straw, and pine straw was in there. It was crazy. It was just loaded up with gunk. And then the pine straw caught all the other junk.
Yeah.
Well, the way that this fiberglass roofing is, it's actually quite slick. I think it's quite slick. I think the pine straw will just run right off it in the water. I really do.
Yeah, that was my point. If it had enough pitch to the water would drag some of that stuff down. But
yeah. And I think that'll
may.
happen. I think that'll happen. I don't, in fact, I know it's happened because I've actually been down there since it's rained and I've seen pine straw in the gutter. So I know something's happening. It's moving. Let's put it that way.
Good.
It's
good.
moving. Yeah. So then there's that. So those are kind of the concerns, or that's a concern, is that you do have to worry about the fact that that you have enough clearance to get out underneath it. So think about that, and think about that water flow. Like, where's that water going to be? If you're water, how are you going to flow? Right. And you need to flow. Water flows downhill. That's right. Everybody knows that. But you still have to think like water. So think about it downhill, and then think about how you're going to get the downhill pitch on your gutters as well. So, and again, leave the space and think about where you're going to have that gutter hanging. Another thing for time planning, and this was just something that I realized, this was, for me, was not terribly high. This was, it was up on top. It's a long story, but they have 2 levels of decks. And so I was on the bottom deck, but on the outside edges of it, there was no deck. So we went from being about 8 feet in clearance to about 16 feet in clearance. And if you have to spend a lot of ladder time, moving ladders to hang this up, I just want you to be thinking about that, because it takes, ladder time is a pain, right?
Yeah.
It just be aware and think about what type of a ladder you need, to get up to that high. Fortunately, we use the multi-ladders, and as tall as I am, it was all the way extended as a step ladder, but I still, and I got up there. So that wasn't much of a problem, but you do have to be thinking about it, because it's part of the, it's part of the job, right? It's part of the job. So pitch. So we put 1.5 inch pitch over a 12-foot span. And I actually tested it. I put some water in, and I just wanted to see how fast the water flowed, So I actually did it on dry land before I put a piece up. I just pitched up a piece and put the pieces down in, and we got pretty good flow. I mean, I wouldn't say it was outstanding, but it flowed out. It didn't fill up the channels. It wasn't filling. I just stuck a hose on it, and it didn't fill them up. So I'm like, all right, that's good. That works for me. I don't think that rain will ever create more water than, a hose, I hope.
Yeah.
If it does, guess what? Everything under there is getting wet anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. So, sure. What other kind of considerations then? I mean, the latter one is a good consideration. Because that is a real point to point. If I was to describe it, you're probably putting up one thing up, and then you got to move the ladder, put another thing up, move the ladder, or reach out. You're not gonna. It'd be great if you had like a little piece of like scaffolding or something over there. You could walk it, but
So I made a tool, all right, because these were 12-foot pieces, and putting them up was not. They weren't heavy, to be honest. It's not the heavy, but they are rather bulky and unwieldy. I made sure to do it on days that were not windy, because they're giant sails, right? So these pieces are they're 12 feet long and they're 42 inches wide. So they're big enough, right, to become windy. But I made a tool. I basically took and made a T. I just made a T that I attached to a ladder, and I clamped it to the ladder. And I would set one piece on the ladder, and then I would attach the other end. So the ladder, the T piece like this, folks, for those of you, we're doing video here, so you can see, we set the piece on top, and then that gave me the right place to be able to screw it up, and it was just a matter of pushing it up.
Push it like putting wallboard on the ceiling. Yeah.
Like putting wallboard on a ceiling, exactly.
Yeah, of course.
And you don't need a crane per se.
Yeah, it's not that heavy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So I just literally, I took a piece of 2x4 and I crossed it with another piece of 2x4, and then I clamped it to the ladder because I could adjust the height a little bit
Yeah.
with the clamp, clamped it to the ladder. Just a regular little 5-foot step ladder, worked like a champ. It was great.
Yeah.
So you need to be thinking about that. Or if you're two people, it's not a big deal. Then it's just two guys. One guy holds, one guy shoots screws, and you're good. So on a long piece, because 12-foot pieces were pretty long. If they were 8s, I probably wouldn't have needed the extra tool, but on a 12, it was
clumsy.
Clumsy. So
no doubt.
All right, so
that separates man from animal. You created a tool.
Well, thank you, John. I'm glad to know I've escalated on the evolutionary chain. Man,
good for you. You passed the test.
Johnny, that's why people listen to this show for entertainment. They could care less about what we're doing. You know that, right?
So, okay.
Anyway, by the way,
I was just looking at a couple of points here. So, anyways, it doesn't sound like it's a complex project, does it? I mean, to me, it doesn't. It seems like it's pretty straightforward.
It's pretty
just taking a little time to do it.
Yeah, it does take some time. I am going to talk about tools just for a little bit.
Yeah.
Got to have a good level. You've got to have a good, and make it at least a 4-foot level. It's helpful to have a laser level, but it's not necessary because a lot of this work is you're literally, like, another tip. The first thing you need to do is check the pitch of the deck, if there is any.
No.
So my deck, this deck that I did actually had a slight pitch out. Slight. And when I mean slight, I mean the bubble was not on the line, but it was really close.
Out? Do you think they did
something
like that?
Yep. Yeah, just a little bit, but it was enough. It helped. Let's just say it helped, right? Because any pitch is better than no pitch. But just be aware of that. So definitely you need a level. You need I cut my roofing material with a circular saw, and here was the tip. This was actually on the label of the roofing material. And it was, you take this was for a circular saw, you take a plywood blade, right? Lots of teeth, lots of little teeth. And you turn it around backwards.
Yeah.
And run it backwards.
Yeah.
And cut it that way. And
that way it won't splinter and all that.
Yeah. It didn't splinter the plastic. Yeah. It didn't break it all up. I did happen to put, I put some blue tape on the shoe of my saw just to not scratch it and stuff. I used a gloss white product, and I didn't want to have scratch marks up the white part, so I put blue tape on it. But John, that tip of turning the blade around, that worked great. I then went and when I cut my PVC, I did it with the same thing, because when you cut PVC, you get all those chips.
Yeah.
And it limited the number of chips that came out. It worked pretty well. I don't know if I'd suggest it, but it's a thought. It's a thought.
Yeah, well, it's a good tip for a lot of different things we can discuss at another point. Yep. But this is one good instance of using a blade on backwards.
Yeah, no, and it was recommended by the manufacturer, and it also said you could cut up to 5 sheets at a time, which was helpful because I really didn't want to cut.
There you go.
I can't remember, but it was a bunch of sheets. It was 23, I think. Anyway, it doesn't matter. The number doesn't matter. It was more than 20. I know that for sure.
Yeah.
So I was cutting them all because they were all the same length. I was just cutting them. I cut 5 at a time. Worked like a champ. And then you need a cordless driver because I put them up with screws. This particular one had a quarter-inch hex head on it. So zip, up it went. And really, those are the only tools you need. You probably need a caulk gun because you do want to caulk any place where there might be, a potential leak. I did trim this all out with PVC. So I caulked all those PVC joints just mostly for appearance sake, and a bit of waterproofing, but really not really for waterproofing, but mostly just for appearance sake. I just didn't want water getting in there and, blah, blah, blah. It's the same old thing. It makes it look really finished when you caulk it properly and so forth and so on. But pretty simple project. Really, I think it was a great value add for the house. It really, really finished off underneath the deck really, really well. Made it look like $1 million. I mean, I'm not kidding. It looked great. Looked like a good, ceiling up underneath it. And then it was waterproof to boot. So
nice. Well, folks, that's a great little story here. I know a lot of people like to take advantage of having a dry place underneath their deck. unfortunately, the deck that I have is too low to the ground. But this is a great trick.
Yeah,
and to get the stuff at the big box stores. Don't make a big deal out of this. There's products out there where you can repurpose some things and get the job done yourself.
Yeah. Yep. And you can, and it's not a technically complex job at all. At least this simple deck was. It didn't have a lot of it had no alcoves, actually. Had a stairwell that came down, but even that was out on the edge of the deck. So just really, if it's a simple deck, it's really a good DIY project. It's going to take you some time because it's a lot of square footage. There's no doubt. It's a lot of square footage, but it's not beyond any DIYer, let alone, guy that's done anything any once in a while. So,
yeah,
Johnny,
that's awesome.
You know what?
What?
The other day,
still thinking about making more tools.
You need to watch the video on my response to Johnny when he just said that on the video. It's definitely worth it. Anyway, Johnny, the other day I was out on the deck, and the spaceship was underneath the deck. I said, I don't need a dry below. I got the spaceship under the deck.
There you go. Was he making his own tools?
Well,
Not like the monkey with a stick and a termite mound.
It could have been something similar to that, Johnny, but it might have been something else to probe. I'm not sure. But anyway, I digress.
All right, I'm out.
We've got to stop. We've got to stop this. Folks, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, would like to give us some new joke material or anything that just happens to come into your mind, send us an email, questions@handymanprosradioshow.com, and we will take your advice. Certainly we will. We do have a website. Again, it's handymanprosradioshow.com. We've got a newsletter on that site. Go to Contact Us. Sign up for our newsletter. You'll get all kinds of interesting bits and tidbits of information, upcoming events, and more. John, one of these days we're going to invite everybody over to your house that listens to this show, and we're going to have a barbecue and a beer blast.
There you go. There you go. Bring your own, and this is the end of the show. I'm tossing it.
We also have a Facebook group that's at Handyman Pros, and we're on Twitter at Handyman Radio. Last words, Johnny?
Last words. That's it. We're out.
Right.
We'll see you soon.
See you next week on the Handyman Pros Radio Show.